Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday Morning with the Braid. As you're coming into this Zoom room, you can let us know where you're zooming in from in the chat. Good morning. Welcome again. I am Susan Morgenstern, and I am the Braid's producing director, and we are so happy to have you all here with us for a conversation with Bruce Vilanch. I invite you to continue letting us know where you're zooming in from in the chat while I explain just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Your audio function is set to mute. This is to ensure that everyone's able to hear our guest and moderator without any accidental interruptions. The event's being recorded and it will be made available very soon on our website. If you would like to use Zoom's closed captioning feature, we have turned it on, and you should find that option at the bottom of your Zoom frame. I think it says CC. And for the Q&A, we will have a Q&A with your questions following the moderated discussion. So please send your questions directly to me in the chat box. You can send them to me at any time in the event. I will collect them, and I'll get to as many as I can in the last 10 or 15 minutes with Bruce. So that's it for me. I will see you later for the Q&A. For now, I am very happy to pass it along to our fantastic moderator, Arlene. Arlene?
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Arlene Sarner. I'd like to welcome you to Sunday Morning with the Braid. I'm really excited to be speaking with legendary comedy genius Bruce Vilanch. After our conversation, Susan will be fielding some of your questions, so feel free to write them in the chat column. Like many of you, I've long admired, enjoyed, and doubled over from laughing from Vilanch's work, behind and in front of the camera. If you enjoyed full-on belly laughs at the sharp zingers and expertly crafted punchlines delivered by the likes of Bette Midler, Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg, Robin Williams, and scores of others, it's a good bet that Bruce Vilanch has written more than a few of them. Nathan Lane once quipped, Bruce has given more great lines to celebrities than a Hollywood coke dealer. I'll share a very short bio of him because the full and complete one would just really take our full hour. Bruce Vilanch is a celebrated American comedy writer, songwriter, and actor. He's best known to the public for his 4-year stint on Hollywood Squares. As a celebrity participant, behind the scenes, he was head writer for the show. In 2000, he performed off-Broadway in his one-man show, Bruce Vilanch, Almost Famous. From 2000 to 2014, Vilanch was the head writer for the Oscars after being an Oscar co-writer for the previous 10 years. He's been a featured writer for the Tonys, the Grammys, and the Emmys. He's won 2 consecutive Emmy Awards for his writing of the Academy Awards, as well as an additional 4 Emmys for Outstanding Variety Show. And now we're lucky enough to have him for an hour. So Bruce, welcome.
Thanks.
I got a little prologue question before I get into the real script. So
Yes.
I looked at so many names of people you worked for, but who has you on speed dial?
Who still has speed dial? What's this was?
Yeah.
Speed dial.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
who did have you on their, no, not speed dial, but, favorites?
a bunch. Obviously, Bette Midler, who was the first, and I've
Right,
been working with her for only 55 years. Oh my God,
right,
where is the digitalis?
right.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah,
And Nathan, because he does a lot of talk show appearances, and we collaborate on those. And uh, well, Billy not so much anymore because he's an eminence grise. He's this
right.
morning he was on Willie Geist's show about reflecting on his career. So, but there are a few.
I'm sure.
I'm
All right.
looking for some who are under 50, but that's
Okay, good. Yeah,
another
please.
story. Tiffany Haddish, call, please.
Yeah.
I
Well,
have to apologize for my lighting. I'm in the hotel and I didn't bring. I'm not. When I was a journalist, I remember interviewing Ginger Rogers, and she had a lighting setup in the hotel suite.
no
I
kidding.
mean, she perched herself on a couch. She had a mark like we were making a movie. This was not a TV interview. It was for the Chicago Tribune. And I thought, what has she gone to all this trouble for? But
Couldn't
now
help
I understand the
and help.
wisdom of her ways.
Right. So I'm going to start with you were born in New York, where your father invested in Broadway shows and your mother helped launch you into show business by getting you signed up with a modeling agency and talent agency. seems show
Yeah.
business was very deep in your DNA. So what kind of parts did you play as a child?
Well, I played child parts, but I rapidly got out of that because I was not childlike. I was heavy. I had a deep voice, and yeah, I wasn't like an authentic child. But there were a couple of things. My favorite was I was a model for Lane Bryant. Lane Bryant, if anybody doesn't
I
remember Lane
remember.
Bryant,
Yeah.
was plus size dresses, and so there were a lot of fat women, and they decided they were running out of fat women. I don't know how they made that decision,
Yeah.
but they decided they should move into fat children. So I was like a porky kid, and so there were two of us, and we were charming chubs, and we would pose, next to. I did a spread with Carol Lindley, who was this thin, gorgeous shiksa, and the idea was if you put your kid next to if he in Lane Bryant outfits, this is what he will land. This is every Jewish mother's nightmare in my estimation, but it seemed to work at the time. But my career, I got too big, and I was moved into stylish stouts, which was not a good thing. And then I was a husky,
Right.
neither man nor boy.
Huskies.
You
Yeah,
know,
they last
and
for
nothing fits husky. Nothing fits huskies.
right.
Even stuff in the husky department doesn't fit huskies.
Well, but you were soon whisked out of New York from Broadway to Paterson, New Jersey, where you grew up, and there was
Yeah,
Broadway.
the
So,
Silk City.
yeah. So, when did you realize you were funny? And has your Jewish identity helped shape your comedy, whether in your
Oh
point
well, I
of
mean,
view, your
yes,
writing?
everybody's Jewish identity shapes their comedy because we are the perennial outsiders. Even right up to today, we are the perennial outsiders, and so we have a unique worldview. And I think it's all summed up in they tried to kill us, they didn't. Let's eat
Let's eat.
every holiday. So I think that informs a lot, and I'm sure it was no doubt in my case it did. But also, I made faces in the mirror, and I made people laugh, and that seemed to work. And I guess I just had a different way of looking at the world. I was not an average kid. I was heavy, so I was not athletic, and I had a vivid life of the mind, and I was very interested in things like theater and literature and all of that. Not the least bit interested in sports, but my father wasn't either. So he had a couple of physical things that kept him from being an athlete of any sort from the time he was a child. So he sympathized with me on that. And he loved Broadway. He loved musicals. And we lived right across the George Washington Bridge. So we would go and all that. And my mother was like a showgirl manquée. She wanted to be a showgirl, but she married a doctor instead. And so she had, she was a great stage mother. She wasn't, Mama Rose, but she enjoyed that I was having. They enabled me because they saw I was having a good time, and I'm forever grateful for that. Also, she came from a family of lunatics. I mean, they were real. They were really eccentric by anybody's standards. I mean, it was like a Kaufman and Hart family.
Yeah.
They were
Hungry.
truly crazy. Right down to my Aunt Gertie, who would come over and hide her purse so none of the relatives would. She thought the relatives were going to get it. She would come in and she'd spend. It was like she was. I said, "Are you looking for the afikoman? What are you doing?" She was looking for a new place to hide the purse. Like I said, "Did somebody find the old place?" No, no, nothing. Nobody ever stole anything from her. But it was that, and she was just one. There was the whole. It was a menagerie, and I drew from each of them, and so I felt like I had a whole boatload of experiences as a kid that I could.
You sure did. Boatload of relatives, yeah. So when you went to college in Chicago, you began writing movie reviews for the college paper and were discovered by Hollywood in the 60s during a seismic shift in movie making. So how
That's
did that happen?
Well, it was the '60s, and the studio system had ended, and the place the lunatics were running the asylum, and the stars and their agents, and everybody wanted to appeal to the youth market, and they didn't know what the youth market wanted. Uh, but so they would bring in young movie critics from the college papers to tell them what the youth market wanted. And this kind of started with the success of movies like Easy Rider
Right.
and Graduate. and pictures that young people identified with. And so we were courted by uh, old Hollywood executives who had gotten out of their Brooks Brothers suits and were now wearing aloha shirts and beads
Right.
to prove how hip they were. And it was kind of hysterical. So that I kind of had a foot in the door that way, and we all were imitating Pauline Kael, who was the writer for the New Yorker, who
Right.
was but she was a very visceral film critic. I mean, she reviewed from her gut, and and so she was a very engaging writer. But a lot of times she didn't. She liked movies like Bonnie and Clyde and The Wild Bunch that were violent because she, for some reason, liked violence on screen. She may have been slightly repressed herself. I
Probably.
met her. I knew her a little bit, and she was a tough cookie. But but she influenced Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, who I worked with in Chicago, and a whole generation of people who wrote about film.
Wonderful. So after college, you had to decide if you were going to go back to New York and resume an acting career or not. But then, while writing a movie column in Chicago for
Yeah,
the Chicago Tribune in 1970, there was a fateful meeting with Bette Midler. She
that
was
was that.
performing in Chicago at the time, and you told her she was funny and should do more jokes on stage, and she asked you if you had any, and a Hollywood comedy writer was born. You've
That's
worked
right.
with Bette now for over 50 years, and give her credit for launching your career as a comedy writer. Bette's confessed that I've never said a word I didn't pay him for. So what's the
He
secret?
also said he's the only person who put something in my mouth that made both of us money.
So what's the secret to a writer-performer relationship that
Well,
lasts
all of
that
them.
long without throwing drinks at her and Beth specifically?
Well, it's first of all of these. Anybody who does comedy started writing for themselves, and when they become stars, they don't have that time anymore. They're very busy being what Joni Mitchell called the star-making machinery, and they're very busy being personalities, and that's the time they used to spend writing. So they bring on collaborators. Now, in Bette's case, she was always a musical star. Uh, all of her shows were built around the songs that she was singing that were on the new album that she was releasing, whatever. So she needed things to go between the songs that established the character of the divine Miss M, the last of the truly tacky women, uh, lady with trash with flash, and and so that was what I did. That was my part of it. But we always had to construct a show uh, built around all those things, and musically, all of that was taken care of by her piano player Barry Manilow.
Barry Manilow, right?
Yeah, so who is a genius at constructing a stage act. If you've ever seen his act, his act is amazing because, or a musical chart. You know, we called him Mary Modulate because every song goes up a key, and as it gets towards the end, I mean that's his secret. And so we were a great team. We had a lot of fun, and until Barry left and became a star on his own. But when she started she was like a sponge absorbing from everyone. And people were attracted to her professionally because she was so unusual and so out there and herself. And so her first backup singer was Melissa Manchester, the first one of the first harlots, and we had Luther Vandross singing off stage, and Michael Bennett was an early choreographer.
Really?
Norma Kamali did the first costumes. I mean, she really attracted a very high grade of curious person who wanted to be in the game with her.
I think
And
we
we
all,
were all in the game. She said, "You hitched your wagon to my star early on." Yes, I
yeah,
did.
you did. Didn't you create Soph? Wasn't that your idea?
Yes, I did. I created Soph. So for Sophie Tucker, who
Right.
my parents had taken me to see. Uh, there used to be Barbara Walters' father, Lou Walters, ran a casino illegally on Palm Island in Miami Beach. And he had shows and all that. And it was one of those places where the gambling was sub rosa, but the show was what people came to see. And Sophie Tucker appeared there. And I was a kid and I was mesmerized by her because she was a lot like all of my mother's relatives. She was a lot like Aunt Gertie, but she didn't hide the purse. She was this big, this big balabusta thing with the. She used to say she would come out. She would have a headband with a feather sticking up, and she would say, "I know what you're thinking. I look like a goddamn circus pony." And I thought, I love this woman. This woman has got it together, and she she wrote she wrote a memoir and called "Some of These Days," which was her big hit record, and uh, she had Rowan Martin of Laugh-In, were not yet of Laugh-In, opening for her. But she would do the show. She would open the show, and they would close the show because she would go around to the entrance to the theater and set up a canasta table and sell books and sign them, autograph the books. Michael Feinstein says the rarest book in the world is an unautographed copy of Sophie Tucker's memoirs.
Hilarious.
So I loved her, and she was risque. She wasn't dirty. She never used a dirty word, but a lot of her jokes were about sex, and specifically about older people having sex. And I thought this was very fertile ground for Bet because she could play that character very well. So we wrote a bunch of jokes and got a bunch of jokes from other places, and it became a staple of her act. And people would come, like Henny Youngman, who was a big fan of hers, would come to see her, and he would come backstage and say, "I got a joke Soph wouldn't do." And he told, and Red Fox gave the strokes that
Really?
yeah, that he said, "You may have to clean this up a little," and he was filthy. I don't know if you ever saw him
Yeah,
before. I wrote for him when
really.
he was at Sanford, and he went out and did, because he was such a big TV star, he went out and did his act, and people were stunned because they brought their kids, and the act was filthy. So he called me up and said, "I got to do something." So we wrote an act, a 45-minute act up front, and then he brought out Lola Falana, who danced, and
Yeah.
he had, before he introduced her, he said, "I'm going to bring out Lola, but after Lola, I'm going to come back out. But when I come back out, it's not going to be Red Fox; it's going to be Blue Fox." And so the people who were offended could take their kids and leave, and the people who were up for it could stay to hear the old material, which, if you remember the party records and stuff, was pretty rank.
Yeah,
But he gave us a couple of things that we cleaned up a little bit. So,
right.
and that was how the soap thing, and it
Yeah,
became,
fabulous.
one of her trademarks.
Sure did. Well, you eventually moved to Hollywood with the idea that you were going to conquer the world of TV. Instead, you got a job writing a Brady Bunch variety hour.
I know.
It was
Can you
a
believe it?
notorious flop and often cited as one of the worst TV shows ever made, along with a few other flops like the Star Wars Christmas special and the short-lived,
Holiday.
right,
Go to this
holiday.
holiday special.
Right. So
No
when
Christmas. Life Day.
more inclusive. So when you were thinking about writing a memoir, you chose to write the book. It seemed like a bad idea at the time about your least successful, most disastrous TV shows rather than so many successes. So why?
Well, because I didn't really want to write a book like everybody else's, a memoir, and
I
then
don't
I
think you
wrote.
could.
Yeah, and I started doing podcast during COVID. There were a lot of podcasts, and a friend of
Right.
mine was organizing them, and he booked me on these various podcasts, and they were all people who were born after I wrote these television shows and committed them. And they knew about them because of the internet. They'd all shown up on YouTube, and I had no idea. I thought we had really buried them. And I realized that the graves were too shallow because they all bubbled up, and they all would ask me, "How did this happen? How did this start? Who said yes to this? And
Right.
have they paid their debt to society?" Very important. So I thought, there's a book in this: how I wrote the worst TV shows of all time and lived.
Yeah.
And the shows live too. And now I do interviews, and people say, "Well, they're so bad they're good."
Right.
I mean, I went to a screening last night of Can't Stop the Music, the Village People movie, in which I wrote the first 345 drafts. So I'm the original writer. So now I'm up there and explaining how this project fell together to a bunch of people who were not alive when it's 40 years ago.
Right.
They're grown people, but they were not alive at the time.
Well, I would encourage everybody to get the book because it's just a wonderful romp through
It's a
some of
lot of
the
fun.
things
And
they
there's an audio version if you want to hear me prattle on like I am now.
yeah.
Although I'm much more theatrical on the audio version.
Are you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Trained.
I listened to Barbara Streisand's book, And that was
Me
just
too. I'm
fabulous.
on page 1,412,
Yeah, I'm almost
graduated high
finished.
school.
Yeah, next February I'll be
She
finished.
knows
But
everything she ever wore and everything she ever
and
ate.
ever ate. Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's interesting when she gets into the work, how
Very
the
serious.
approach to the music and why she did certain films. And she's very candid about how she got talked into certain things, and the whole relationship with Ray Stark, who is as big a gonif and a bastard as she writes him is. I knew him; he was a pretty horrid guy.
Yeah, he
But
was.
yeah,
But she
but
offered you, when she asked you to write for her, you turned her down.
no, well, I had written for her for free for a bunch of AIDS benefits and a bunch of a bunch of Jewish benefits, and my twin causes, gay and triple gay, AIDS, and Jews.
Right.
So, and then she was coming out of she'd come out of her period of stage fright, and she decided she was going to do a tour, and she asked me to write for her, and I didn't ask for a lot of money, and she said, "Oh, you're too expensive," and I said, "Sell a lamp." You
Right.
know,
She has
she
some
was
old
she was
wounds about
she was
money.
she was pulling apart. She was selling the house and all the things in it, and uh, she laughed and she called Robin Williams and said, "I need you to write me jokes." And he said, "Well, call Vilanch." And she said, "Oh, he's too expensive." And
Love that.
Robin said, "I pay him in pizza. What do you mean he's too expensive?"
That's a wonderful story. Well, you've survived all the bad ones and go on to win Emmys. You've written 25 Oscar shows for hosts and presenters like Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg, Steve Martin, Chris Rock, Goldie Hawn, Richard Pryor. How do you work with other writers and hosts like Billy Crystal, who has credited you with writing for Oscar show's success and recalled that spoofing films like Jerry Maguire involved just some great Jewish whining?
Yeah.
So I got to ask, who's your favorite host? Who is the most difficult? And we're shamelessly looking for your juiciest Oscar stories
Oh
here.
my God. Well, it's hard. I mean, they're all friends of mine, so it's hard to say. I mean, I did four of them with Whoopi, who I work with. I'm working with right now on something new, and I did. Billy was great because he was a full service host, and I
Yeah.
love Hugh Jackman because it was not the kind of thing he does. We had done two Tony Awards before, but that was fun because it was so different. But I have to say, I mean, my favorite in a weird way is Steve Martin because he is such an oddball. And he's a big movie star, and he manages to make fun of people without being the least bit mean spirited. And so, of course, they love him. Uh, so, if I had to pick one, I suppose it would be that. But it's not a hard favorite choice. The most difficult one was Ellen DeGeneres because she was so fearful. She was, I knew her before she came out, and she was cheery and fun and all that. And then after she came out, she just became this kind of repressed, terrified individual that somebody was going to take it all away from her, and she just became very difficult, and it wasn't pleasant. The second time was easier because she had done it once, and so she knew what she was doing. But the first time it was difficult to. It was just wasn't fun. It's always been fun. I mean, it's like playing in the Super Bowl if you're a football player. How you're not going to like that?
Right.
It's the biggest event for the kind of stuff that I do. So, but I have people often ask me, "Is there a joke that you couldn't do on the Oscars?" And I say, "Of course, there are a million jokes you can't do." But my favorite moment was with Steve Martin when his first time hosting. We had a great joke. He was going to come out after the monologue and say, "I have good news and bad news. The bad news is my fly was open throughout the monologue. The good news is the camera puts on 10 pounds."
That's a great joke.
The great joke. And he was going to do it. And then as he's stepping on the stage, he turned to me and says, "I can't do the cock joke," we called it. He can't do the cock joke. And so I can't fight with him. He's going to go out there for, a billion people. So I turned to the stage manager. I say, we're cutting the cock joke. And so the stage manager says into the PA, "The cock joke has been cut." And the audience is going, "Cock joke." And I'm looking on the monitor, and Judi Dench is looking around, "Cock joke." She's looking at the playbook like there's some, like it's some kind of a bit. Anyway, so that was my favorite thing that we could do. But there are legions of stuff, obviously.
That's
You
a
know,
book.
the censor. Well, yeah, the censor is sitting there with a button that they for the 7-second delay to activate it,
Right.
and it doesn't. It happens rarely, but because most people, most people behave. Jack Palance
Oh, that
uh,
was hilarious.
did not, but I think most people didn't hear the setup to the whole thing. Jack Palance won the Oscar for City Slickers, which was Billy's movie. Billy put him in the movie. And I said to him, "Are you friends with Jack Palance now?" And Billy said, "I'm too scared." Jack Palance was an actively scary individual. I don't know how much of it was real and how much of it was him being the character he chose to be in life. But and Billy made some jokes about him in the monologue, and then he wins the award, which was presented by Whoopi, who had won in that category the year before. And so he comes up and he gets on stage, and before he does anything, he says, "Billy Crystal, I crap bigger than that." and, and the network censor caught that one, right? She wasn't going to let that one go. So Billy, of course, was like shocked that he would say that. And we thought, what are we going to do about that? And as we are saying to ourselves, what do we do about that? We look and we see Jack has dropped to the floor and is doing one-arm push-ups. And Whoopi's behind him kind of going, because no one knows what's happening. He is showing how fit he is. It's hysterical. So of course we threw out a lot of stuff, and from the rest of the show it was jokes about Jack Palance's virility. We did a number with a whole bunch of girls of kids with Vanessa Williams and little kids on trapezes, and Billy said Jack Palance is the father of all those children, and it went on like that through the evening to the point where Billy's manager came back and said, "How many more of these are you going to do? I'm running a pool in the audience. I'd like to win."
So even though you had a script, you had something that happened and you had to, on the
Oh,
spot, come up with
yeah.
all these lines.
Well, you hope for those moments. I mean, you hope somebody will do something ridiculous and you can come up with something on the spot that will do it.
Right.
And it kind of set the template. Although people have done it before, Johnny Carson and Bob Hope, they had done it before, but nobody had done it quite as much as we had. And so it became a kind of template. And now they're all, that they try to do is on any award show, the host likes to position themselves in where they behind something, following something that they think might be incendiary that they can use somehow, unless they're not comedians. I mean, Jennifer Lopez doesn't want to do that.
I
But
would guess.
yeah,
Yeah. So, you're well known for your trademark look with your long hair, with or without a beard, very distinctive glasses, and a collection of your double entendre themed t-shirts.
this, by the way, is from Steel Magnolias. Drink your juice, Shelby.
Right? You've joked that for years you were compared to a Wookiee, especially after co-writing the Star Wars holiday special. Your clothes closet is loaded with thousands of your famous t-shirts, and you said, only in Hollywood does a personal mishigas, does your personal mishigas become your signature. So which t-shirt has prompted the wildest responses?
Oh my God. Well, it would have to be. Excuse me, you're standing on my penis,
Right, right.
which Lily Tomlin quoted in a movie about me that was made called Get Bruce from 1999. And Lily, yeah, she said that's her favorite. But I mean, I can't top that. So
That's
why
pretty
why why try?
right. So do you have a personal t-shirt maker or do you do them on your own? You have so many.
I used to. I had money in an outfit called Don't Panic, and I did it so I could call them up and say make this, and they'd have to.
Right.
But I eventually pulled out of that. So I no I search online. I do know people in the business who I can call and say this would be funny. Why don't we do this? And when I was on Hollywood Squares, of course, I would wear them, and that made people money. So that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Although, they tend to come up with things that you could not wear on Hollywood Squares.
Uh-huh. You
You
can
know,
feel
uh,
free to wear them here.
well, we had a big problem with the censor. Uh, we had the FedEx logo, but it said Fed Sex, when you absolutely have to get it overnight, which
Hilarious.
was, FedEx's old logo. And they said, oh, FedEx will sue.
Did
And I
they?
said, I can't believe FedEx is going to make an issue about this. Why are they going to bring more attention to it?
Right.
It's not like, Bob Hope wore it on the Oscars. It's on Hollywood Squares, for Christ's sake. So, but they had to pixelate the the uh, the caption. Fed
Ah,
Sex Day, but they had to pixelate the caption, which costs money. So, anything that costs money
I don't
is
want
a
to do
work.
it's a work, right? So you've always been openly gay and proud of your role as an early LGBTQ plus celebrity who didn't fit the mold. You've written for fundraisers, spoken at advocacy events, and we're part of the Hollywood Squares, a show with an openly queer subtext during a time when most TV personalities stayed closeted. You said, I've always looked like this, I've always been out, and that was revolutionary in its own way. We're at the end of this year's Pride Month. What do you think has changed since you've been in Hollywood? And given the present atmosphere, what are the current challenges?
Wow. Well, I think what's changed is that AIDS forced people out of the closet in order to save their lives.
Right.
And I think I mean, I remember Letterman saying to me, there are all these gay people around. When did the mothership just land? And I said, it kind of, yeah. I mean, this forced people out. And I think that while the audience always knew that Paul Lynde was gay and Richard Simmons was gay and Charles Nelson Riley and all the people who were on Squares back in the day, they didn't want to think of them as gay because gay equated evil. And the gay character was the one who had to commit suicide. And so it was just because they liked them and they didn't want to that we had used to get AIDS fundraising and all that. We turned it towards marriage equality because that was how we got first class citizenship. And people think that it came about because we all wanted to go to Vera Wang and get dresses. But the truth is, it came because when during AIDS, when people who had longstanding relationships died, they had no legal standing. They
Right.
couldn't. They were not immediate family. They couldn't be in the hospital. They had nothing. The family would swoop down after the death, and this was what put marriage equality over it. Because once you put a human face on it, uh, right-minded people couldn't really ignore it anymore. And of course now with everything else, it will inevitably be challenged because the cult is in power right now, and there is the dark side is licking their chops, and they've tried to use a divide and conquer technique with the gay community by separating out trans people as candidates for special bad treatment. And they've blown up the trans issue, which is about a tiny bunch of people who are part of the gay picture, and they've tried to make it seem like they're attempting to take over society. So that's the challenge now is to be on guard and continue to fight that.
Well, I know you're there fighting. You know, most people seem to know you from your 4 year stint on Hollywood Squares as a celebrity participant and head writer for the show. How did Whoopi Goldberg help you get that gig?
Well, we had done comic relief. I had done 15 of them with Whoopi and Robin and Billy, and the same producers, Pat Lee and John Moffat, uh, revived Hollywood Squares, and they wanted Whoopi to be the center square. And they asked me to head write it first, and then they said they're going to Whoopi for center square. And when she said yes, she said, "Well, I think Vilanch should host the show." And they thought, well, she's nuts, but we don't want to piss her off this early. So we'll test him. And it was, ridiculous. This is for the win, Louise. So they said, we're looking for somebody much more mainstream than that. But we'll put you in a square. And so they put me in a square. And my joke is to the left of Whoopi, if that's possible. And and then when she was out, sometimes I would be in the center square. But and it worked out. It just we were a hit, and
Must have
it
been
did
fun.
very
Must
well.
have been the best fun to do that.
Oh, it was the most fun. I mean, part of it is that there are 9 of us up there, and you can't be in a bad mood, and because you have 8 other people staring at you, going, "Girl, pull it together." So you even get surly types like Roseanne, who, of course, you never know because she's nuts. I adore her, and I mean I don't adore where she's gone politically, but I've written for her for years. And at one point, she said she had 43 distinct personalities. And I said, well, would you ask number 18 to start speaking to number 26 because we're not getting any work done. And so she let go of that idea. But she would come in a bad mood. She had a talk show of her own at that point, produced by the same company, King World, and so she had to be on Squares to promote her show. But we would say, get it together. Have try and have a good time. So it was great fun to do it. And we did 5 shows in a day, so it was a party.
Well, in 1999, the documentary Get Bruce followed your life and career and brought much wider public attention to your behind the scenes brilliance. Even your mother, whom you credit with developing your sense of humor, also appeared in the documentary. You said that seeing your life celebrated while still alive and getting kudos from stars you've written for was deeply rewarding. So, what are you most proud of?
Oh, what I'm the most proud of is that I've maintained my sanity through all of this. That's the thing. But it's hard to say. I mean, the Oscar shows and Squares, and then starring in Hairspray on Broadway and on the road, and so getting what I really always wanted to do, which was be an actor. I mean, I wanted to be Zero Mostel. I wanted to be the fat guy who moved gracefully and got laughs and also got tears, and so I got to do that in Hairspray. So I'm proud of all that, and I'm proud of my activism because
Yeah, big part
you
of your
could,
life.
yeah, to be a part of that because other people can sit quietly, but I couldn't. When AIDS started, the one thing we could do is in show business was raise money for the charities that the government was not giving money to. So while people were lobbying the government to start coughing up some cash, we were raising money, and it was difficult at the beginning because everybody was afraid of the disease. It was a pariah, and there were a few people who would do it. And I used to say, I'll do your cause if you'll do mine." So I became familiar with all the bigger diseases because I'll do spina bifida if you'll do my show, and we raised a lot of money that way. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah, I'll bet. I want to talk a little bit more about your Broadway debut. In 2000, you were back on Broadway in your one-man autobiographical show, Bruce Vilanch, Almost Famous. And then in 2005, on Broadway and on tour, you starred as Edna Turnblatt in Hairspray. You were the star with limos and wigs and lots of makeup and dresses. Did you love it being back on stage, touring around?
Did my what? My mother?
Did you love it?
Oh yeah, of course. It pushed an OC. Look at how heavy I am there. My goodness. It pushed it. Well, that's also 35 pounds of fat suit,
Ah,
and that's a 40-pound beaded dress. So I was carrying around 75 pounds
so you
of
must have
added,
lost
in
weight.
addition to my own personal God-given fat suit, and of course I was wearing 2 3/4 inch heels. So your center of gravity changes. So I'm probably taking a deep breath and hoping I don't plunge forward. I'm thinner in that shot. I don't know what happened, but uh, I love doing it. It pushed this OCD button I didn't know I had. I loved coming out 8 times a week and doing the show. I think partly because you know the minute the lights go down at Hairspray, the audience is excited
Yeah.
and they're there to party. It's not like Medea where she kills her children and drags the corpses around. I mean, I understand Vanessa Redgrave now. If I had to do that 8 times a week, I would not be so lighthearted.
Right.
I get her.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've done so much. What haven't you done? What's next?
Oh, I don't know. Well, next I wrote a play about the first Oscar show that I did, which was produced by a very flamboyant guy named Alan Carr, and we did a reading of it, and we're gonna do a workshop of it with me and a few other actors, and we'll see
That's
where it goes.
current. You're doing that
And,
currently.
and I got a new thing from what that we're gonna do. Look for it in the fall, and it's I can't say anything more about it, but and I mean, I always thought it'd be fun to run a sitcom. I've written for many sitcoms. I would come in and rewrite other people, but as Chuck Lorre, who is the king of sitcoms, says, it's a young man's game. You don't want to be doing these hours at your advanced age.
Right,
I
right.
think he's just maybe slightly younger than I am. I don't know, but I think he's right. I think I, so I think I've removed it from my Oprah wish board or whatever that thing she has that she
Vision
says
board.
we should all hang up in the den.
Yeah, vision boards, right.
The
So,
dream board, is that it?
vision board. Oh,
I don't know.
vision
I'm still
board.
waiting for my Buick from her.
Right. And finally, one more question before I hand you back to Susan and some questions from our audience. You've given us so many wild, wonderful, belly aching laughs. What makes you laugh?
Oh, I love camp. I mean, failed seriousness has always been my favorite thing. Richard Nixon was the funniest thing in the world. I mean,
Oh,
anything he opened his mouth, I would start laughing because you knew it was bullshit, and you knew he was a bad actor. He was trying to put it over, and so I have to confess I do love failed seriousness, but I also I'm taken with people who use language. I mean, as much as I love physical comedy, someone like George Carlin, who I worked with, who had such a brilliant use of language, Eddie Izzard, who I don't know if he's still going by Eddie Izzard, but he's brilliant and literate. David Sedaris makes me laugh when I read him. I mean, I started laughing reading Patrick Dennis and S.J. Perelman and Art Buchwald and what they used to call Russell Baker. They used to call humorists, and I laughed a lot at that. And the fat guys, Jackie Gleason, I was crazy about Jackie Gleason, and then I worked with him, and he was so nuts. I mean, he read the Zodiac, and first he had to do your horoscope, and then I thought, was he
kidding.
always this nuts? But I got him late in the game. Is the
Yeah,
problem? Yeah,
strange.
uh,
Jackie
yeah,
Gleason, Zodiac. Hard to put that
yeah.
together.
I know.
Yeah,
He was crazy. He was
yeah.
he was just nuts. And I met Jason Miller, who you probably remember from Jason Patrick,
Oh,
who
loved him. And
who's
James,
Jackie Gleason's grandson, because his
Patrick
father
and
was Jason Miller from The Exorcist, who married Jackie's daughter, and
okay.
Jason Patrick is their kid. So, and I knew both of them, and they kept saying, "Oh no, it always was there. It just he finally crossed a line where it came out, where he didn't care anymore about what people thought."
That was wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Bruce, I want to thank you. It's been a complete joy, fun speaking with you today. Loved your book. I encourage everybody to buy it if they really want to laugh and have a good time. So check out the link to Bruce's website in our chat column. And now here's Susan to take some of your questions.
Here's Susan.
Here's Susan.
Great. Thanks so much, Arlene. Oh my God, I'm laughing so hard. I hope I can get through the Q&A. It's just wonderful. Bruce, I think you'll be happy to know that you have sort of achieved Woodstock status because I think now there are many people saying, "Oh, I know Bruce Vilanch, and I knew Bruce Vilanch when," and
I'm
I
not
was
surprised.
there. So the first question came from someone named Janet Mandel who asked if you were active in USY, which I
Yes.
USY was in high school.
That's United Synagogue Youth, which was an organization that conservative temples put together, basically to try and to facilitate marriages between Jewish kids, so we wouldn't go off and marry outside the faith. And I was active in it. I was an officer of North New Jersey Hagalil region, and I went to Israel in 1964 on the Israel pilgrimage they do every summer. And I was fairly observant back then, back in those before I went to college and became a hippie and was into mysticism and discovered Kabbalah, which they never taught us Kabbalah because
Yep.
it was too booga booga. I think they thought we would scare the Gentiles if we started talking about mysticism. So it was kept from us. But now there's a whole generation of what we call Balchuvas, who are kids who have returned to modern orthodoxy, and they're deeply into all the mysticism and stuff. So yes, I was active in USY, and if whoever asked that question was in Jersey between 1960 and 1965, we probably met each other at one of the conventions.
Indeed. And as Janice said, how many Bruce Vilanches could there be actually at you in USY? So there
Yeah.
you go. Um, Someone else asked, I love this question. Are your dreams funny?
No, they're terrifying. I'm one of those people who I'm always not getting to the thing I have to get to, or not knowing the line, or it's always there's a kind of a fear, and I wake up thinking, how did I miss that? How and I realized I made it. It was all in a dream. I made the whole thing up. And
Oh.
I had a shrink who once discussed this with me, and I forget what she said. It was actually quite bright. I used to dream about babies a lot, and she said, that's yourself. You're dreaming about yourself. So, and then at some point, I got I finished therapy. I said, okay, I think I'm okay now. I think I'm as well adjusted as I could be. But the dreams as I get older, actually, I think they're they I never know what it's going to be, but it always seems to be the same thing. You just you don't quite get to where you have to be, or I don't quite get to where I have to be, and I know somebody will write in with a solution. But hang,
I hear you. Then we have some questions about what it was like working with certain people because we love your stories. So first, what was it like working with Whoopi Goldberg?
well, she's fantastic. I mean, she's she writes she came up writing characters, and her first show was her as different characters. There was no Whoopi character,
Right,
and
I
when
saw
she
that show
became
on, it was on Broadway, right? It was a one woman.
Broadway,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they were all character pieces. And after Color Purple, when she became a movie star, she was hosting things and appearing as stuff, and there wasn't a Whoopi character, and so we kind of collaborated on who Whoopi was going to be when she was on stage. And of course, she was going to be kind of street, and suitably profane, and not be like anybody else, basically. Her mom's Mabley was her North Star,
Right,
and she eventually played her in an HBO movie. But I
right.
remember we were on Hollywood Squares, and she said Dionne Warwick called her and said, "You've set black women back 10 years by the way you look and the way you talk." And Dion at the time was in business with a psychic named Madame Cleo. Call me now, Madame Cleo. And I said, you think Dion would have seen this coming? But no. So, but I mean, I thought it was kind of I mean, I understand the criticism because Dionne Warwick was always in gowns and
Yeah,
coiffed, and the traditional a black version of the glamorous Hollywood star,
right.
the white Hollywood star, and she may not have been comfortable being that, but that was who she was. Uh, and so maybe she was just kind of annoyed that Whoopi could get away with her look and all that, and capitalize on that look. And there's nobody else. I mean, Whoopi is
Right,
unique. There's
right.
ain't no other one like her.
Right. Someone else confesses, Bonnie confesses she was the only one in yeshiva who watched Donnie and Marie because it was famously on Friday nights. You worked on the Osmonds Christmas special?
I did the Osmonds Chris. I did Donnie and Marie for like 3 or 4 years,
Ah,
and yes, and briefly I worked on Marie without Donnie, and then Donnie and Marie again on their stage act. So yeah, I had a lot of Mormon stuff, and I tell this story, which I'm sure this crowd will appreciate. When I first went to work for Donnie and Marie, Mother Osmond came into my office, and she was a large woman, and they had 14 kids. Her name was Olive, and her husband was George, and we said that George was the Mount of Olives. So Olive Olive came into the office, and I was sitting there smoking, and I think I had made myself a Bloody Mary, and I was drinking more in those days, and she said, "Look at you," she said, "drinking and smoking, and your body is a temple. How can you treat your body like that?" And I said, "Mixing meat with milk, you heathen." And that was the last note I got from her on habits.
I love that. I love that.
Because they were very devout. They were like frummies, they were frummy Mormons. You didn't mess with them. There were no coffee breaks at Donnie and Marie because caffeine was verboten, and the list of things they couldn't say was longer than the Hollywood freeway. I mean, it was difficult to write around all of the things. Everything went to the elders in Salt Lake City
Uh,
before it was done. I have many stories about things we could not do on Donnie and Marie.
oh, I
Because
bet. I bet. I bet. Here's two people are asking a similar question. One person is asking if you have any desire to direct. That's from Richard and Rollin. And Sharon was saying if you could do only one thing, would you act, write for others, something else altogether? I guess
Oh, if I could only do one thing, I guess I would act, sure, because
act, sure.
it's instant. The gratification is out there. You're creating this thing and you're putting it out for an audience. I don't know about acting on camera so much because you have to bring it all down, and I'm a pretty big personality, but I'm willing to give it a try. Uh, writing is the kind of thing where you wind up doing it whether you like it or not. So you're kind of compelled to sit down and do it.
Uh-uh.
And
Directing? Any desire to direct?
no, I never had a desire to direct, and I think that's because I never worked with a director who screwed something up that I wrote.
Huh.
Uh, I mean, I was very lucky in that regard, and I think a lot of writers become directors because they see their work manhandled or woman handled by various directors and they're not happy with the outcome. And I also don't have that. Richard Lester, who's a great director, did the Beatles movies and Petulia and a lot of wonderful pictures. Uh, I was working on a movie with him on Superman, one of the Superman movies with him. And he said, you have to be a megalomaniac. He said, to direct, you have to have the ability to listen to what everybody says and then filter it all out and do whatever the hell you want to do.
Right.
That's the key. The good directors are the ones who know how to do that. The bad directors are the ones who listen to people and have self-doubt. You cannot have self-doubt. I don't think Scorsese or Spielberg have any self. They know God knows Hitchcock, to prove he had no self-doubt, had storyboarded every single shot in the movie before he started shooting the movie. When I was a journalist, I got to interview him a couple of times. It was towards the end of his career. And of course, he by that time had become the Alfred Hitchcock television star.
Right.
So, he was always full of shtick but also wonderful stories. But when he showed you his method, you realized it's all in his head and nothing gets changed, and it's all, it's all, and that's how you have to do it. And that's why he worked with the same kind of stable of actors, and basically they knew that what he said was the correct thing.
Right. Right.
Because he had like Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant, two great movie stars and great actors who came in and did whatever he told them to do, and some of their best work was in his movies.
Right. So of course they trusted him too.
Yeah.
So this is from Rhonda. This is a great question. Is what on earth is your work schedule like?
It's very, very, and I think that's why I got into the game. I didn't want to be in a job where I had the same schedule every day. When I was at the Chicago Tribune, they tried to lock me into a schedule, and I disabused them of that notion after a while because I would go out and get stories that happened in the middle of the night. And so I could not be at a desk in the middle of the day. And after a while, they said, let him do what he's going to do. And so I was one of the few people who, living in a corporate structure, got to dictate my own terms. Now, if you do a sitcom, for example, you really are anchored to a certain schedule because you're in production all the time. But when you do the kind of stuff that I do, I've been fortunate that I can work on whatever schedule I want to. I'm often on the vampire tip, I have
I
to
was going to
say.
say, are you a morning person or a night person?
No, I'm a morning person if I have to be.
Right.
But given my druthers, I would sleep from 4 till noon. You know,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, which is why I love Vegas. whenever I would be in Vegas with a show, it was fabulous because Vegas was like you sleep from 6 to 2,
Right.
because nothing happened before that. No matter who I was there with, there were no mornings. I mean, there were lots of hours after the show, but there were no mornings.
Ah, fantastic. Um, I'm going to take this one more because now they're all, hundreds of questions are tumbling in. So here's a bit of a challenge. What do you, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the world. This is not at all funny. So what do you think is the best response to it? And God knows if you have something funny, I think we could all use it.
My best response to what? What is?
Anti-Semitism.
Oh, anti-Semitism. Oh my God.
Yeah, oh my God,
Well,
indeed.
yeah. I mean, look, it's not just the old school anti-Semitism. Now it's tied up in Israel, and it's a complicated issue. And the only answer is to say you don't know what it is to be Jewish, and which is I've been getting that from years from Black people.
Right.
Say you don't know what it is to be Black, and especially when with the gay civil rights thing was happening, they said, well, you can actually hide. We have no closet, and of course that was the same thing with Jews going back to gentleman's agreement. You had to voluntarily say that you were Jewish unless you were very very Jewish on the face of it, but uh, all you can just do is be aware of it and help the people who are constantly fighting it. Again, it's not going to go away,
Yeah.
and it's just we're extremely weird space where people who can put on a kafia and think that they are activists. They have no idea what's going on. You
Yeah.
know, and gay people especially running around. Say, I said, would you like me to turn you over to Hamas and see what happens to you? I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So
Exactly
I
right.
wish
Well,
I wish I had a funny answer. I wish I had a real answer.
no,
But
but here's the truth. I mean, it's important for us to realize as you're making us laugh hilariously that we're all human and we're all in this same space, and that's what we're all about is, connecting. So I really appreciate, your ability to jump and go that direction. Before I take us to a couple of announcements, I just want to ask you one question. Here you go. Any regrets? To us, it looks so glorious every moment of your life. Any regrets?
not not really. I mean, what good are they? I used to when I was feeling low. When I first moved to LA, it was to do the Manhattan Transfers television series, a short-lived television series. And I had two offers. I had an offer from Lorne Michaels, who had produced some Lily Tomlin specials I had worked on, to go to New York and write Saturday Night Live when it was starting 50 years ago. And I went in and met with him, and it was it was very druggy, very homophobic, very misogynistic, and I had a feeling that I would not do well there. Also, I wanted to get to LA because my mother, who I adored, was very controlling, and I knew if I lived in New York, she'd be all over me. And I had to put some distance between us. So I took the job in LA, and of course, I'm very glad I did. But there have been moments when things was happening when I said, "Well, if I'd gone to SNL, I would be this, I would be that." Probably not, but when you're a little vulnerable, you begin to regret things. And so I've learned not to anymore. It's just like, hey, you made your choice, and this is what's happening. And I mean, unless I did something, I mean, a social faux pas
Oh,
that
we all
I
have
certainly
those.
regret those. Those happen all the time. But
Yeah. Well, I just have to say, Bruce, we cannot thank you enough. As someone just put in the chat, comedy is the best medicine, and for you to join us on the
have you
last
had
week of
Demerol?
Yeah, Demerol, I guess maybe works. I have to say that for to have you join us during Pride, to finish up the month of Pride and to lift all our spirits with everything going on in the world, we are so grateful to you.
Oh,
Arlene,
good.
fantastic questions, wonderful interview. And
Fun.
I want to thank MJ behind the scenes, even with some tech challenges seem to, get everything. So thank you for that. Thank you, of course, always to Rhonda Spinak, our artistic director, our leader in all things. So I just want to tell you we have a few wonderful events coming up at the Braid. First of all, this very afternoon, if you are local, we are having a screening of our beautiful film Stories from the Violins of Hope. I hope, MJ, you're able to throw that in the chat. Thank you so much. And it's an hour long, and we have a Q&A with people who made the film, including the writer and the director, who happens to be me, and an actor in the film, and our editor and our cameraman. So it should be really a great event. It's a very, very moving 55-minute film. And we also have, just keep an eye, for those of you here for the first time, feel free to join our community. You can join our community on our website. There's a link to the chat that MJ will post about getting on our mailing list. Because, for example, in August, we're doing 3 fantastic shows. We're sorting out exactly where we're going to be filming that, but audience is likely to be invited, and that will be very special. And we have a bunch of other events, and the best way is to get on our mailing list, and you'll hear about everything that we do. And finally, as I get ready to send you on your way this Sunday, I just want to say this last thing. For many of you voluntarily purchased a ticket to this free event or made a donation. And I just want to say we see you and we are beyond grateful to you. You know, when the fires hit Los Angeles, we were about to launch a huge fundraising campaign, and we stopped immediately because everybody was hurting, and other donations were being called for so many worthy organizations at that time to help people. And now we're wrapping up our 17th season and about to launch our 18th season. So if you are so inclined, this is the time. Anyone can make a donation and support our work by going to the-braid.org and clicking on the donations link. It's in the chat. There is no donation too small or too large, including apparently appreciated stock. We can help you with that. Meanwhile, MJ has posted this link as well as our mailing address if you prefer to send a check. And thank you for whatever you're able to send our way so we can continue our mission to leave no Jewish story untold, like Bruce Vilanch's and so many others. So thank you so much. With that, I hope you all had half as much fun as I did. Thanks again, Arlene and Bruce. Thank you, and have a great rest of your Sunday.